listener production.
Hey, Chris Speary with you. Welcome to The Briefing. This year's bushfire season has gotten off to a devastating start, and the conversation has inevitably turned to the impact climate change is having on Australia's natural disasters.
It's tragic, and people like me have to pick up the pieces. I'd love to get some of these politicians out on a fire truck with me one day and show them what's happening.
A chat with one of the country's most experienced firefighting chiefs on what to expect this summer and where we're falling short on climate action is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Sacha Barbour Gatt. It's Thursday, December the 11th.
Hey Chris, capital cities across Australia have lit up their biggest monuments in green and gold overnight to celebrate the beginning of our world-first social media ban for under-16s. The Harbour Bridge in Sydney, Flinders Street Station in Melbourne and the Story Bridge in Brisbane all displaying the colours after what Anthony Albanese described as a historic day.
Across Australia, those under 16 are starting their day a little differently, without social media.
While the Prime Minister is celebrating and spent all day yesterday celebrating, Chris, he was very proud of himself. He's also being trolled relentlessly by teens who have managed to keep their accounts.
Yeah, TikTok and Instagram are among those apps that have been flooded with under-16s posting content about still being on their platforms, many writing comments under the Prime Minister's video spruiking the ban. Some have actually found out new ways to skirt the new rules that have forced social media companies to wipe millions of underage accounts, including this kid who spoke to the ABC.
I squinted up my eyes and face, looked at the camera, covered up my teeth, and it worked. Just let me through. After I did the Snapchat, I went to Insta and, passed it, squinted up my face. Real easy.
Well, there you go for anyone listening who's looking for a workaround. That's one way. Look, and others actually did wake up yesterday to find that their accounts were still active and they didn't have to jump any of these hurdles. And while they are celebrating for now, the e-safety commissioner, Julian Grant, says they will eventually find themselves unable to access their favourite social sites.
These isolated cases of teenage creativity, circumvention, spoofing, and other ingenious ways people will inevitably push boundaries will continue to fill newspaper pages, but we won't be deterred. We are playing the long game.
Yeah, so if you're wondering, under the legislation, if children continue to successfully circumvent the ban, neither they nor their parents will be punished. It is the responsibility solely of the social media platforms to comply with this legislation, and they're looking at a bunch of different ways to do it. And that's the thing is that Julian Grant says, we don't actually have any specific recommendations to the platforms on how they do it. We just want them to do it. So what that kid on the ABC was talking about, scrunching up his face, that was like an AI thing where it was like scanning their face. People are using their parents' faces. Mm-hmm. I think you've been approached by some of your dance students to do it. Yeah. A lot of adults as well weren't necessarily happy with this. He really was on like a press tour of it yesterday and lighting up the monuments was almost I found it bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre.
But they're really trying to spruik it as like, oh my God, look, we are leading the world in this space. I've seen that it's quite popular with parents of young children, and I can understand why, as someone who has a literal baby, it terrifies me thinking about those conversations and how I'm going to manage my son's social media existence and to be able to just say, sorry, you're not allowed. And by the time he's old enough to get it, it probably won't even be a thing because teenagers would never have had it by the time he's a teenager.
Yeah, and I mean, on the flip side of that, I take myself out of the whole parenting thing because I'm kind of like, y'all choose what you do. I'm not going to argue with what parents want here. I do think when it comes to us, like adults, it's the things that we're going to have to do to work and navigate around this. Some of the things that I've been seeing online are adults that are being told, oh, you have the online behaviour of a young teen. You must be a teen. Prove that you're an adult now. So that comes with additional requirements for us, new hurdles for us to jump in. I'm just not too keen on giving more of our data, more of our private data to these tech companies who they've shown time and time again to not be doing responsible things with.
Changing pace now, and Australia has recorded a grim new statistic, the highest number of Indigenous deaths in custody in 4 decades. New data from the Australian Institute of Criminology shows 33 of the 113 people who died in police or prison custody in the last financial year were First Nations, the largest proportion since records began back in 1980. Now, this is a 6% increase compared to last year, and it brings the total number since the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody to more than 600. 600, and around 400 of them have been in prison custody, 200 in police custody, and at least 6 Chris in youth detention.
Yeah, and First Nations people make up less than 4% of our country's population, but they account for more than 1/3 of our prisoners. And that's something that advocacy groups have long called out. We've heard from the CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. You know, she's described the deaths in custody as preventable and evidence that racist policing practices and harmful systems built on oppression are continuing. She's described this new data as an extremely painful truth. And she says that it really shows that police and prison custody is not a safe place for Aboriginal people. That's something that the Royal Commission, like you mentioned, Sash, that Royal Commission, that's something that they pointed out at the time back in 1991. And she's just saying it's incredibly disappointing to see that these things are still happening.
Australians travelling to the US could soon be forced to hand over their social media history under a new Donald Trump plan. This proposal would apply to visitors from 41 countries that don't need visas to get in. That includes Australia. Applicants would need to submit the data along with other valuable information, including phone numbers from the last 5 years, email addresses from the previous 10, along with the names, addresses, birth dates and birthplaces of family members, including children.
Yeah, and I mean, the question is why this data and for what reason? Well, it's not exactly clear, but it is believed to be linked to the Trump administration's desire to clamp down on who is entering the US and wanting to know more about who is coming in, while policy experts say it's a move to further suppress critical online speech against the government. And we know that to be true. US Citizenship and Immigration Services said in August that they'll start looking into anti-American views, including on social media, when assessing the applications of people wanting to live in the US.
And we've already seen student visa applicants to the US forced to make their social accounts public so that they could be put under scrutiny. And that same rule is coming into force from Monday for skilled worker applicants too. There's also been a crackdown, as we've seen, on immigrants, including recent moves to ban all asylum claims and stop migration entirely from more than 30 countries. And I guess the question is, especially with this new policy proposal of it's just targeting everyone. It's saying we want to see all your social media history. We want all the details of, you know, your previous email addresses and phone numbers and your children and your aunties and uncles and whoever. It's going to deter people from traveling to the US, and it has already seen that impact during Trump's second term. Hollywood Boulevard in LA reported a 50% fall in foot traffic over the summer. Las Vegas has been hit by a decline in visits, while Canadian statistics show residents who have made a return trip to the US by car dropped more than 35% in July 2025, and commercial and airline travel from Canada also dropped by a quarter in July. So we are seeing the impacts of these hardcore policies on American tourism.
When you think of Italy, I'm sure the Colosseum and Leaning Tower of Pisa all come to mind, but so does pizza, pasta and tiramisu.
Buon appetito.
And those are all great things the UN's Cultural Agency has just officially recognised.
Yeah, so this is really big, Chris. UNESCO has voted to recognise Italy's national cuisine as an intangible cultural heritage, making it the very first country in the world to be recognised for its cuisine in its entirety rather than for a single tradition or recipe. Posting to socials, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said the news filled her with pride.
Oggi l'UNESCO ha riconosciuto la cucina italiana patrimonio dell'umanità.
Yes, and that for Italians, cuisine is more than just food or a collection of recipes. It's culture, tradition, work and wealth. So Australia is no stranger to UNESCO lists, but we actually don't have any on this particular list, which is the one that recognises intangible cultural heritage. And that's where things like, I had a little look at the list, pool swimming in Iceland is listed. So is beekeeping in Slovenia. But we've also seen a bunch of foods already included on this list. The French baguette, borscht in Ukraine, Belgian beer, couscous from North Africa and kimchi from Korea.
Yeah, and what I love about this is that it's been on the sites of this Italian government since she came to power in 2022. She's thought that this would be a really great way to boost tourism in the country, but also a way to push back against fake Italian products. So the Italian government has launched a complaint against pre-packaged carbonara sauce that's showing up on European shelves that is not Italian.
Well, no, because carbonara, you can't get it out of a jar. It's got fresh eggs. It's got guanciale. Oh my God, don't even get me started on carbonara.
And if you had to name the best song made by an Aussie or Kiwi in the 21st century thus far, what would it be? Well, Rolling Stone Australia has dropped its top picks and there are 300 on that list, Sash.
Yeah, not surprisingly, there's so much great Aussie music out there and Kiwi music. Kelly Holiday's bookended the list with Dancing 2 coming in at 300. Yeah, I'm sick of that one. There's a bunch of artists from Troye Sivan to the Veronicas, Angus and Julia Stone, Paul Kelly, Sia, Tones and I, Dom Dollar, Rufus Du Sol, Amel and the Sniffers, before getting to the top 3. Coming in third, Empire of the Sun with this 2008 banger.
Oh, I love that song. It reminds me so much of Embarrassingly SingStar. That was probably one of the first songs I ever sung on SingStar.
I was partying to that, so that shows our age difference.
It really does, and we're even going to get that age difference more pronounced now with the second spot, which went to Kylie Minogue with her 2001 hit, Can't Get You Out of My Head. And earning the crown for Best Australian New Zealand Song of the 21st century so far is... Look, well-deserved. Cool song.
I wanted it to be an Aussie.
Yeah.
It's a great song,
It
though.
is a great song. Well-deserved. And look, she dropped that when she was 16 years old. That song came out when she was 16 years old. And that was Lord's debut single. So she's gone on to do crazy stuff since then.
Now, speaking of crazy things,
Ooh.
but maybe not crazy, actually. Like, just do it.
Just do it.
Our survey.
Do our survey. Guys, go into the running for a $100 gift card before Christmas. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you want from our show next year. And a bunch of you guys have already filled out the survey.
I was going to say, we have had a lot of people already engage with this and we are so thankful. Thank you for listening. Thank you for telling us your thoughts. We basically just want to learn more about you and what makes you tick. So fill in the survey. We've got a link to it right in the show notes.
Yes, and that is it for our headlines for today. Coming up next is your chat, Sash, with one of Australia's leading fire experts about what's going on this bushfire season and what he wants the government to do. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next.
The 2025 bushfire season is well and truly underway, with fires burning right across the country this week and the death toll at 1 after a firefighter on the New South Wales mid-north coast lost his life. Communities have been left devastated and dozens of properties have been destroyed in blazes spanning New South Wales, WA and Tasmania, with a warning that the worst could be yet to come. We know as Aussies that bushfires are an unfortunate reality of living in this country, but we also know that climate change is making them more frequent and more dangerous than we've ever seen before. It's now 6 years since the devastating black summer of 2019-2020, and with authorities describing this year's season's start as ominous, many are wondering if we should expect another catastrophic summer. Greg Mullins is one of Australia's leading experts on bushfires, emergency management and climate change after his time as Commissioner of Fire and Rescue New South Wales and his years campaigning for urgent climate action. Greg, welcome to the briefing. Has the start of this year's bushfire season taken you by surprise at all?
Look, not really. What took me by surprise actually were the forecasts that spring would be wet and then summer would be wet, because the indicators just weren't there. It was looking dry. There was a sudden stratospheric warming event in September, and that stacked the odds for a bad bushfire season on the east coast. And sure enough, here we are. We're having fires in Tasmania, New South Wales, and of course in Western Australia. So there's so much volatility in the atmosphere because of the warming of the atmosphere, because of the burning of coal, oil and gas. It's confounding a lot of the computer models that meteorologists use. So the oceans are warmer than they've ever been, and the models just aren't taking that into account because they can't, because it's never happened again. So they're running these models over and over and over, and they're coming up with results that maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have been correct. But at the moment, there's so many confounding factors. They're sometimes wetting a finger and putting it in the air could be a bit more effective. And I say that figuratively, not literally, but they're really struggling, and fire services are struggling because we can't predict what's going to happen even from week to week.
You were out at the fire ground on the Central Coast in New South Wales this week. What can you tell us about it and how locals are holding up?
Look, that fire moved incredibly quickly. A fire started. They're not sure how yet. They've got a few ideas. Forensic people were there yesterday. But look, total devastation of the homes. You could just see the ferocity of the fire. I was there on the Saturday night, but up in the National Park cutting fire line and fire breaks yesterday in amongst where the houses had burnt. People are just walking around in shock. You just see the looks on their faces, the 1,000-mile stare. Very upsetting. I've been there many, many times, unfortunately, and I know they're thinking about what's their future hold now. I don't know whether people are insured, whether they have anywhere to go, but just before Christmas, they'd be thinking about, all the Christmas presents have gone. What are we going to do for the kids? So it's really, really sad, and all of this has a human impact. If you'd looked at the summer and spring fire outlooks, you wouldn't have expected a fire like this at this time. And so I suppose people were unprepared. It's not much fun as a firefighter going into those disaster zones, seeing the aftermath and feeling pretty helpless, to be honest. And particularly, we ran into some colleagues of the firefighter who died the day before, and that was pretty harrowing, upsetting, speaking to them.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, you mentioned there that locals on the Central Coast were kind of blindsided effectively by this fire. We weren't really told to expect these sort of conditions so early on. What can we then look to the rest of the season for? Like, what can we expect? Or is the message to expect the unexpected because it's just gotten so volatile?
Exactly, Sacha. Expect the unexpected. The climate drivers seem to be resetting to a drier phase for January on in summer, which is fairly normal. So it just feels like it's going to be a hot, dry summer. But, might be wrong, might be lucky. It might rain again. But I don't think so. I think we're in for a pretty harsh fire season. And not just in New South Wales, parts of Western Victoria, Southern Victoria, South Australia and southwestern West Australia. And as we've seen this week, emergency warnings in Tasmania. And that's unusual. Most of their big fires happen in January and February. So the odds are stacked, I think, towards bad fires this year.
I want to shift the conversation to climate change because I feel like we can't talk about bushfires or natural disasters anymore without the topic of climate change coming up. Now, I think back to Black Summer, there was this huge groundswell of support for climate action in the wake of those fires just because of how devastating, how widespread they were and how much international attention they got as well. Do you think those summers permanently changed how we feel about climate change, or do you think that sentiment has actually died down in recent years and we've forgotten about it?
No, look, surveys I've seen, 82% of Australians are worried about climate change and link climate change to worsening natural disasters. So we went through Black Summer, and then you'll remember we went through the devastating floods, Lismore in 2022. We had 3 years of La Nina, which really drove flooding rains, but it's more intense than it used to be. We kept breaking records, like in Ugara. They described it as an inland tsunami, and people were on their roofs, had to be picked up by helicopters, and somebody lost their life there. So I think people are getting the message. We're seeing it worldwide. We saw the Los Angeles fires in January. I know the area. I've fought fires through the hills around LA. They don't get fires in January. That's winter and it's wet. So these climate patterns are shifting. You're seeing devastating floods across the world, more and more people losing their lives. The attribution studies are very clear. Nobody's making this stuff up. Nobody makes any, the conspiracy theorists are, they're making money out of this climate hoax. And we even have a president of a big country in the world who thinks it's a hoax. And I just wish they'd read the science rather than the comics. We know that the scientific studies have proven that. And the fire weather is far more intense, so the fires are bigger and more damaging.
Well, Greg, it must have been frustrating for you then to see the conversation happening nationally in recent weeks where we saw the Liberal Party adopt emotion, essentially, to walk away from net zero commitments. How did that make you feel, given everything you've just told us?
Look, I'm incredibly frustrated. But before Black Summer, I formed an organisation called Emergency Leaders for Climate Action. We tried to warn Prime Minister Morrison in early 2019 that a bushfire catastrophe was coming and of things his government could do. And because we mentioned climate change, we were just snubbed. So we're used to this. So look, they'll do what they do, and they're on a trail to irrelevance, which is a shame. You need a good, strong opposition in any good political system. They might find their way back one day when they, as I said, stop reading the comics and read some science.
Black Summer was described at the time as a once-in-100-year event. Do you think it'll be 100 years before we see a bushfire season like that again?
No, unfortunately not. We've seen an exponential rise in the sort of serious fire weather. You might remember 2009 Black Saturday in Victoria, 173 people lost their lives, over 2,000 homes destroyed. After that event, the fire weather was so far off the scale, fire services nationally worked with the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO, changed the fire danger rating system to add a category of catastrophic, which is literally off the scale because it was happening so often because of this intensification of weather systems and increasing temperatures, winds, lower humidity, dryness. So Black Summer, it was almost inevitable. Fire services and scientists were expecting an event like that, but I was blindsided by it. I didn't think it would last so long. I didn't think it would be so destructive. I fought fires throughout New South Wales, and a few times I didn't think I'd come home. So will it happen again? It's inevitable. The world continues to warm because we're addicted to coal, oil and gas, and that's heating up our atmosphere, the emissions from burning those fossil fuels. And the weather systems just intensify. There's more energy. It's tragic. And people like me have to pick up the pieces. I'd love to get some of these politicians out on a fire truck with me one day and show them what's happening.
You're obviously very critical of the coalition. Is Labor doing enough? I mean, you were at the protest at Rising Tide, which was calling on an end to investment in coal and gas, but we know that Labor hasn't ruled out extending the life of a number of coal-fired power stations right across the country. So is anyone in politics actually doing a good enough job on this?
No, no way. So there seems to be no sense of urgency. It just seems like Prime Minister Albanese will get to it when he gets to it. And he's staked out some middle ground and he doesn't want to go too fast or too hard and upset people. And that's frustrating. They've got this incredible mandate and he's not pushing the boundaries. And the target that they set for emissions reduction or reducing climate pollution by 2035 doesn't pass the scientific test. 62 to 70%. It's a big range. And they're saying on current trajectories, it'll be about 48. Well, that just disregards my grandkids and their kids. It just says they're cannon fodder in a big political fight. And I'm not prepared to put up with that. So, for God's sake, let's get on with this.
Greg, before we let you go, obviously, you know, like you've explained, bushfires not only are part and parcel of living in Australia, but also, you know, they're going to get worse and they're going to get more frequent. They already are. What's some practical advice before we let you go? How should we be getting ourselves ready for bushfires? Because they're coming whether we like it or not.
Yeah, look, people need to take heed of what their fire services, local firefighters are telling them. It used to be the summer months, the bushfire seasons are lengthening, so it's spring, summer and often into early winter that we experience fires. But prepare your homes, all the flammable material, move it away, clear your roof gutters because that's where lots of houses catch fire. If it's a catastrophic fire day and you live somewhere that's really bushfire prone, don't be there on that day. Go into the city, go somewhere safe. Listen to those emergency warnings and take heed. But look, and talk to your politicians, your representatives. They actually work for you. It's not the other way around. Tell them what you want them to do and get them to vote for the future and for your kids and for your safety. So get active.
Greg Mullins, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing today and for sharing your message with us.
Thank you, Sacha.
That was Greg Mullins, former New South Wales Fire Chief, speaking with me there. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That is it for now. We'd love it if you could throw us a review or a rating wherever you're listening. It's a really great way to help us grow and reach more people. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. I'll see you next time.